All right. Welcome to another episode of the DR podcast. Today, my guest, Brandon Bantz, former Major League catcher, D1 catcher at Dallas Baptist University, current owner of Catchers Central. He's located in snowy Denver now.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, it is dumping there from what he just showed me. So I'm in San Diego for all the people watching. It's 65 out, just rained. I definitely could go to the beach if I wanted to, but I could do that any
Yeah,
day. So, like I said
yeah,
earlier, buddy, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. It's gonna be fun.
yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. It's gonna be awesome.
It's been fun, man. Me and Bancy got to know each other a little bit when he was out in San Diego. He brought current big leaguer Brad Miller in. They did some work together. It was super fun watching him behind the scenes and getting a chance to get to know Brad a little bit. And
Yeah,
Brandon showed me some drills that they did. And I mean, to be honest, it was one of for me, the most educational sessions that I've had in a long time. I've had some of those in the past where you just get to like pick guys' brains. Brad was super engaged and it was a lot of fun. Well, let's start out with a few things that you're doing in the baseball community right now. You've got
yeah,
the business Catcher Central going. I mean, if you look online, he's got everything legit firing. He's doing hitting stuff, he's doing catching stuff. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing in the community with Catcher Central now.
yeah, man. So, it's actually kind of a cool story on how all that kind of got going, and obviously we're a catching and hitting brand primarily, baseball and softball world, training youth all the way to major league and Olympic, have some Olympic softball players as well. But it's really a company. It's not just built on elite level instruction. It's really built on elite level people. And so it's more than just like, I really had this. It kind of goes back to my own career, really, and a lot of what I felt like kind of derailed my own career. And I was a guy that had a lot of all the physical ability, right? But for me, it was the mental side. It was kind of the stuff away from the field that really kind of never let me cap out to like what my physical kind of abilities really were. It was just the way that I trained, the way that I thought, just the whole process of who I was as just a human being, right? And so it was really important for me as I started to get into teaching and instructing and being a part of that development process, right? That we're a part of, to not just have something that was about teaching mechanics or giving a drill, right? It was really about shaping the entire athlete, and that's not just the physical stuff, right? And so it's a company really built. The roots and the mission is really built on just impacting people, and then being able to use the game of baseball and softball as a way to do that, right? And our focus is really um, understanding understanding how people think, how to compete, but also how to compete against those other thoughts that kind of come in your head as an athlete, right? And
Right.
as these guys, as they kind of grow in their careers, right, all of a sudden, they're playing in front of 50,000 people every night, at least hopefully, and then they've got millions of other people watching on TV, and then you've got the other millions of people on social media, and there's a major like identity conundrum, if you will, that really takes place, with that I think a lot of people don't understand, and without having kind of been there or been around people outside of the field, it's hard to kind of understand what that's like, and basically trying to get these guys and gals to understand that they're more than just the stats on a piece of paper. Who they are as a human being and who they are as an athlete aren't aren't you know coexisting. Like they're two separate things, and what they do is they get to play a great game, but who they are is something completely different, and their character and their integrity and their makeup and all of that. And I think a lot of times that this part often gets overlooked in the development process, and we forget that when we can create this true identity, right? That it's not wrapped around baseball, it's not wrapped around softball, it's not wrapped around becoming, a major league or a Olympic athlete, right? It's something completely different. And when we can have kind of some ownership of who we actually are, our ability to actually develop and handle all of the other things that come into the development process of baseball and softball, we can manage that a whole lot better. Because I think a lot of times that's one of the biggest issues that we see, or that I think goes on, is really just that process. And so I really wanted to develop a company that was twofold, right? It was about the athlete, but also the instructor and the actual person that was interacting with our athlete. I think we're able to try to build this entire ecosystem of just quality, influential men and women who can impact our kids and raise them and develop them up into being those type of people. And so that's really what it's centered around, man. It's centered around this family, of just, that's what I want it to feel like, as we're traveling the country, we're doing all these different things, and we got camps and clinics and training programs with organizations, training programs with, coaches, curriculums, and working with, professional teams and college teams and all these different other avenues that we're a part of. It's really about creating this culture, creating this family, that's that's so important and integral into creating development. It's just so much more than that. And I wanted the company to be more than just, X's and O's and T drills and soft toss drills,
Right.
um,
Do you have
so yeah,
coaches
and that's
working
kind of
for
what
you,
it's
or
for.
how many guys do you have working for you out there?
So really I have, former teammates that I've been around, athletes that I've trained, people that I've met along the way. Is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
just it's really this family of just people across the country. And so
Right.
wherever we go, there's people that I kind of call on there, and we kind of work that area. And I want people in kind of the areas that they're living in, as best we can, right? To kind of create that ecosystem there, because they're going to be
Totally.
there, and be able to work it through those types of people. And so I don't know if I'd necessarily say I have people technically like working for me. It's really
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we're working together, right? They're working with me. And so it, like I said, I've kind of got pockets across the country, in the Northeast, the Southeast, the
Totally.
Midwest, and the central part, and the West, and all that. So wherever we're going, that's kind of where I've got kind of people that are
That's
currently there.
that's awesome, man. That's a cool thing. I mean, it's hard to find people that you can really trust on to help you with something that you're so passionate about, and like for me
Right.
right now,
Yeah.
this time of year it's like the most fun time of year for me, because it's major league, minor league off season. So not only do I get to
Right.
see guys, those guys are actually, like you said, part of the family. I've got some of those guys helping and getting to know the students that are around the facility, and then they get to see them hit. I mean, to me, that's one of the coolest things that I get to offer, um, as far as like creating that atmosphere. And, like you said, we have the training atmosphere. It's always going to
Mhm.
be there, but having people that you can kind of look up to, and like you
Right.
said, their hometown, they got drafted in the same hometown that you grew up in. It's like, I think that stuff's pretty cool, man. Well, I think that's fantastic what you guys are doing. So you're traveling around, you're working with catchers, you're working with hitters. Talk to me about
Yeah.
some of the, the higher level students that you have? You said you got a few in the Olympics. I have a few softball catchers myself, and I
Mhm,
think it's interesting the correlation between both sports. I mean, hitting
mhm,
translates for both sports to me, and I think the catching that
mhm.
we're seeing, the the new age of catching, it's
Right.
different style, it's translating to softball also. So
Yeah,
talk to me a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with some of the higher level players, and how that's been
yeah.
going for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's this, like there's oftentimes this, like, misnomer of, like, when you're training these type of athletes, um, you gotta be able they do something different than what our younger level guys are doing, right? And that's oftentimes not really the case. Um, when you're dealing with an upper level athlete, like an Olympian softball player or a major league baseball player, professional athlete in general, um, it's really just about all we're trying to create is that feeling of of belonging, right? Like I deserve to be where I'm at, because our game is hard, man. Right? Baseball and softball is hard. Um, our success rate is 30%. And if you're a 30% success rate, like you're a Hall of Famer, right? And so there's not many jobs out there that you can go to your boss and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to get this thing right about 3 out of every 10 times. And you don't really get to keep your job very often, right? And so understanding that process, right? And there's going to be stretches, no matter how good you are, there's going to be stretches where you're not successful, for 30 or 40 at bats in a row. Like that's a realistic thing that can happen. Um, so really understanding kind of what's going on here, I think is really like the biggest thing that you deal with at the upper levels, right? And so it's really about kind of creating this trust and belief, right? And it's ironic that we kind of are talking about this today because I just actually posted something on this morning, just about this confidence, right? This kind of mythical word that we get thrown around in our game all the time, right? Of confidence. Like, what is it? How do you get it? Like, how do you lose it? How do you keep it? Like all these different ideas, right? And so to me, confidence is really just about those two things. Excuse me. It's a trust and it's a belief. It's a trust in the work that you've done before and the preparation that you've put in, and then believing in that work when it's time to compete. And so that's really all we try to do, and all I try to do personally when I'm dealing with those guys is create a framework that they can now put their trust and belief and their faith in, because we're doing something every single day for 6, 7, 8 months a year. Um, we just need oftentimes those guys when they're going good, they're going good in the world at what they do. It's really what happens to kind of maintain that level, right? And work the ebbs and flows of what our game just naturally provides. And if you can create this framework around what they're doing, where they have this feeling of this comfort, like all of a sudden, like, okay, I know, like, if everything else feels like it's terrible right now, like I don't have a feel for anything, but I know this drill is like my home, or this thought process, or this cue, whatever that is. If I can hone in on just that, simplify it down to just that, that's something I know to be true, AKA that's my trust, that's my belief, that's the thing I can hold true to. Now, all of a sudden, maybe everything else feels like crap, but I can do that and I can go execute that in a game. It's something simple. It's something I know, it's concrete, it's foundational, right? And
Mhm.
that's really all you're trying to create with those guys.
Right.
It's about freeing up their mind to be able to go compete, right? And it's not, again, that doesn't sound like anything different than what you try to do at a younger level, right? When you're dealing with 10, 11, 12, 13 year olds, it's
Right.
really trying to build that framework of trust and belief of what they're doing, that they can go out and you know, uh, um, trust that when they're competing, really,
Totally.
and so uh, there's oftentimes, like I said, there's oftentimes like, oh, once I get here, my level of training changes. Well, that's not really the truth, you know. It's maintaining that, right? You're just dealing with a different mentality most of the time. Oftentimes with professional athletes, you're dealing with elite level competitors, guys and gals that think differently, um, and know and oftentimes have a little bit more self-confidence in themselves, or whatever you want to call it. Now it's just about kind of creating something in a structure, um, to kind of keep that confidence and that trust level there all the time, because we're all human beings and we're all
Mhm.
prone to dealing with this idea of like, man, I don't know. No human has ever not had a seed of doubt in their head. If they are, they're lying, you know? So what do you
Yeah.
do in those
And
moments? How do you create something in a structure and a framework to combat that, you know?
yeah, and from what I hear, the best coaches are telling me when they're around the elite, performers, the best players on the planet. I mean, that's one thing that never wavers, right? It's that,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the flows of the game happen, but right, they maintain the trust and they maintain everything, and the consistency from year to year is just, I think, partially
Right.
a result of how you mentally stabilize yourself throughout season. It's hard, man. And I think
Yeah.
that really takes me into like the story about when you came in with Brad Miller, and you guys were doing, it was a Friday night game that he was getting ready
Mhm.
for. You guys came in the morning, something like that, and it was such a cool story. I really haven't told this story at all, but for me, it was like one of the coolest days because you guys came in, you were working on hitting the inside pitch, a drastically, inside pitch, like couple balls off the plate. You were working on like keeping it fair and really trying to stay inside the ball. And that was like the main focus of the session, right? You guys did a bunch of drills around that. And then he went into the game that night, and lo and behold, got an inside pitch, took that same path that you guys were working on, hit it down
Mhm.
the third base line for a double. And I texted you and I was like, holy cow. That was,
That's
I was like,
right.
wait a
That's
second.
right.
Wait a
That's right.
second. That was so got to see him working on it, and then got the same pitch, took the same approach. And I feel like that goes right into what you were talking about, like
Yeah.
the trust that he
100%.
had with you, and then to go in the game and compete, like,
Yeah,
I
because I
thought,
think oftentimes, like we said, like, I've seen you do it in some of the things that you've posted and watched you work. Like, as a coach, the best thing that we can do is have athletes work on something that they don't necessarily know that they're working on, but they're creating these really good habits, right? So, and I think as a coach, you have to be really careful not to kind of put everybody in a box and like, all right, my philosophy is X, Y, and Z, and every hitter is going to go through this same philosophy, and I'm going to do this drill for this philosophy, this drill for this point, this drill for this point, right? You got to be really careful of that. And you got to really, and that goes back again to kind of what we talked about in the really beginning of kind of why we got started and how we got started, and the whole roots of it is understanding your athlete, understanding all of the things that are going on in their life, all the things that are going on with their body, with their brain, with all of that stuff, to understand how to best approach the whole kind of totality of the situation, right? Understanding what the athlete does when they're going well, understanding what their tendencies are and their pitfalls, understanding how, for a guy like Brad's been around for a long time, right? So
right.
he's kind of got a book on him, how people pitch him. He knows how they pitch him. Pitchers know how they pitch him, right? So it's that constant chess match, right? So understanding for Brad to be good, he needs to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And so a lot of the things that that we did that day were really specific to Brad to just make sure,
Right.
for specifically that he's turning correctly and completing that turn. Oftentimes Brad's hands are electric. They're some of the best that I've ever seen. Either played against, played with, and then coached. Like they're electric. And sometimes I think he falls back on them too often, and he would probably agree with me. Um, and so oftentimes it's just reminding him to continue to turn. When we got him to turn, all of a sudden his power numbers went through the roof, right? But it was just because he relied so much on these for so long because they were
Hmm.
so good. And so a lot of the drills that we do kind of were centered around that, right? It wasn't necessarily to focus on hitting the ball in. It was
Right.
because in order to hit the ball in, you have to stay connected longer. It
Right.
forces you to. There's no possible way for you to keep a ball in fair and your connection stop, right? So all the things that we did were just to maintain for Brad to continue to feel his turn, whatever that looked like, right? For
Right.
him and his cues and how he thought. And so that part was really cool. And not only that, we were working that ball up and in, right? Because in my opinion, that's the hardest pitch to hit in all the game.
Right.
Um, Hard fastball up and in because you have virtually zero margin for error, like absolutely zero. You're going to get blown up. You're going to be late. You're going to be under it. All those things can happen if for just millimeters off in your rotation. And so that was the pitch he actually got in the game,
Right.
um, off of the lefty. Who's the lefty you guys have in San Diego? Hill, is that right? I think that's his name.
It was late in the game, right? Was it a
Yeah, it was Hill. It was the sidearm guy.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think his
What's his
last name is
name?
Hill, I think.
Tim Hill. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 you
and
guys nasty for sure.
he's a tough freaking
It
left on
comes
left,
at you
right?
from way
Yeah,
over.
and so the fact that he was left on left, got a heater that's got some, arm side run to it up and in,
Right.
and he
Right.
was able to maintain his turn and keep his path and his direction. All those things happened, and he hit a laser down the left field line. It was just like it was awesome. And he texted me right after that with just this huge smile on his face. He was like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah, that
So
was a
that
good
was a
piece,
fun one.
dude. That was a
Yeah,
really good piece. I was impressed. He came in late in the game too. It was like a pinch hit and really
yeah,
got in
yeah,
there, dug in on Hill, and like you said, it was one of the like I said, one of the coolest stories that I haven't had a chance to tell, but now the person that was with me kind of you get to reference things a little
yeah.
better. So that's awesome, man. Tell me a little bit about what it meant to you to be inducted into the Dallas Baptist University Hall of Fame.
Man, that's it.
Let's
It
go back
has a
to your
lot of
college days.
yeah. That
Take you back.
first first off, I didn't feel like I was worthy of that at all. Um, It's been a very prestigious program for a long time. I was very fortunate enough to be there. I have kind of an up and down story, in that regard. Uh, I was a bit of a late bloomer. I didn't really develop and kind of quote unquote get some sort of idea to be that level of an athlete till much later in my at least my high school journey. I always had the physical ability from the catching side, but I was so mental hitting wise, right? Like everything. I was the guy that I got in the box, and again, this is the way I trained. So your brain's a muscle; it's gonna do what you train it to do. I got in the box thinking about every single movement I had to do. So I was like, where my hands were, where my weight was on my feet, where my hips were. I'd going back, like think feeling in my hip, like where my hands were. Like I'm trying to hit 95 with
All
all
right.
that going through my head, right? Like, and so the fact that I even got there, as I look back on it now, I'm just like, how'd you even hit a ball? Like more or less have any like sustained success? Like how'd you even hit, But that part got me there. And then honestly, like this is where the roots of a lot of what is now Catcher Central kind of became. And there was a lot of things going on personally in my life that I wasn't handling very well. Um, I had gotten to a point in my life where I I couldn't stand the person that I was. I was like getting dressed for the day and going to sleep, like, getting ready to go to bed, like purely in the dark because I didn't want to look at myself in the mirror. Like I was so fed up with that type of person that I had become, and you know, just who I believed and who I felt like, God had kind of called me to be. I wasn't being that person. And so a lot of that kind of flowed into my life off the field at DBU. And God was so gracious in putting me there because I don't think any other program would have cared enough about who I was as a human being and who I was as a man and a person, and more so than what I was doing on the field. I started as a true freshman. I killed it in the fall, like just crushed it, and kind of earned like a starting job as a true freshman at a pretty big time D1 program. And I was playing probably two out of every three games on the weekend, and then maybe one of the two games, and sometimes both of the games on the weekday. And this was about probably a quarter of the way through the season, maybe a third. And I was hitting close to 400, like just demolishing, just crushing it. But then a lot of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes kind of came back to the coaching staff. And I mean, obviously it's not a huge school. So there's a lot of communication in that regard. And so my head coach at the time, um, who's now actually the head coach at UCSD, he basically just set me on the bench. Didn't tell me why, just set. And where I was mentally and how immature I was, just again off the field, not just as a human, right? I didn't handle that very well at all. Became a terrible teammate. It wasn't like I was mean to guys, right? I wasn't a dick. I wasn't encouraging, which is kind of my natural personality. Um, I wasn't. My energy was gone. Um, there was nothing there, and I was just people would your teammates would score runs, and like I'd sit at the end of the dugout and wait for him to come to me, and then give him some sort of like haphazard high five. Um, and that's not the person that I was, right? That's not the human that I knew to be, and the teammate that I wanted to be. And so that was just who I became. I would get pinch hits every once in a while. I don't think I got another hit the rest of the year. Um, and so my numbers just tanked and plummeted, whatever. At the end of the year, you go into your end of the year meetings, and I I basically went in there full well to tell them I was out. I was like, this place is, I had some choice words for them that I was going to give them. This place is BS. Like I'm out. Like a lot of people don't know this in the DBU world, but like I had 4 or 5 other offers to, some SEC schools and some Pac-10 schools that I was going to go to. And I walked in. Normally, those meetings take 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the most, right? Just kind of talking about the season, like, hey, great job. Here's where you're going, talking about the summer, where your plans are going to be, and then kind of where they would like to see you grow coming into the fall for next year, right? That usually pretty formal, or there's pretty formality to that, right? Mine was an hour. My meeting was 1 hour long. And I think maybe the first 10 minutes of the meeting was baseball. And so basically there was all these times where I was sitting in this chair across the desk from Newman and Hefner, Coach Freeling, who was there, and I was like, it was I can't really explain what happened there, but like for me, it was God basically telling me like, you're not going to talk, you're going to sit here and listen. It was God was speaking through these men, and I was trying to like, I was like, I could feel myself sitting in this chair and I was like yelling at them, like, what you're saying is BS, like this is dumb, like I'm out of here. But like I was literally like could feel myself internally like yelling and screaming, but my mouth like wouldn't open. I was just stuck and I was sitting there. And then I audibly heard this voice basically say, like, no, you're gonna sit here and listen to what I have to say to you. And that was a huge one of the two major turning points in my life, um, that kind of led me to the trajectory and the path that ultimately ended up with the career that I did have. And again, I just don't know many programs that would not have given up on me, and two, would have taken that approach to an athlete that was virtually successful. Most of it's like, well, as long as it's not affecting him on the field, like I don't care, right? That's a lot of the approach that you see, um, and I didn't get that. And so I think back to to your question, I tell that story because that's really to go from that to being inducted to the Hall of Fame, like, is just a wild ride for me that just doesn't really seem real and doesn't really seem like um it's warranted for me, right? I just I ended up with a great career, but again, with all the things that happened before, and then to see where that kind of became, and then be inducted with Ryan Goins and Victor Black, who were both. It was kind of a wild year for DBU at that time. Is all three of us made our major league debuts in the same year, basically a few months
That's
apart.
awesome.
Um, and so we all three kind of got drafted together. Yeah, bless you. We got drafted together. We made our major league debuts together, and then we got inducted together. It was kind of this cool thing. Vic had a great career, and unfortunately, just injuries didn't allow him to continue. And Ryan had a great career for himself. I think he's still playing somewhere. Last time I checked, but he played for a long time as well. And so that moment of sitting in there, thinking about all the different players that have come before us, and um, that are better than me, just to be sitting in that group, of just, and then thinking about my journey to that point. Um, it made that moment just all the sweeter for me, and it was a really heavy moment. It was a really sobering moment of just feeling like God has really just been super faithful in his journey with me, and where he's taken me. And yeah, man, I can't, it's hard. Again, it's hard for me to like put in words how that moment really felt. It was even more special. I mean, honestly, that moment was more special to me than even my first, when I got the call that I was going to the big leagues, like that moment was sweeter to me just because of all of the things that had happened before, on a personal level, and the growth that I had to that point. So
Right.
um,
It sounds like from their perspective, you embody kind of the person that DBU is really looking for, right? And that's the commitment to the program, but the bumps along the road, and the growth, and the type of person that you developed into, and the leadership. I mean, there's it's not a secret that the catcher position is looked at as, you know one of the leaders on the team, and can be honestly a big difference maker in the clubhouse. And so, I mean, that's such, like you said, such a huge honor. Congrats to you on that. I wanted to make sure you got a chance to share that moment with everyone. I'm sure you don't, like you
Yeah,
said, you
man, I
don't talk
appreciate that.
about it much, right?
No, I don't.
It's hard
I
to talk
don't.
about, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I mean,
We,
it's not, most people don't really ask about it very often, to be honest. Most people just talk
yeah,
about what
yeah.
happened after DBU, So I appreciate it.
Well, like, I
I think
think
that's what
that's,
makes that place special, though.
right, right. Yeah, and everyone, a lot of my followers are prospective college players that are, you know, going to listen to this and be like, okay, well, so there's a guy that got a chance to make it to the big leagues, and there was bumps along the road. How can I better myself and get ready for the college experience? And kind of learn from other people's experiences. I think that's huge. I mean, that's, like you said, it ended up putting you in a position to make it to the DBU Hall of Fame. And then, like you said, you got drafted in the 30th round. That was 2009. So,
That
so
was
I
a
got
heck
on
of a day,
my,
by the way.
right.
Yeah,
I
no, you're
mean,
right. That was one of the, so that day, well, really it was 3 days because at that time the draft was 3 rounds. Um, but man, that experience is something like any other that I don't think a lot of people can understand. I mean, obviously you're a top 1% guy, like you're going to go in those top few rounds. Like you probably know you're going in those top few rounds. Um, I fielded calls for 3 days. Well, not, I fielded calls for 3 days. Not, I fielded on the first day, not saying I was going to go in the first round, but basically telling me to be ready for day two. Right. Um, I probably got 10 phone calls on the first day, basically saying like, hey, you're on our board to be one of our next picks in day two. Right. Which I think is, what is day two? I think it was like uh 2 through 10 or 2 through 8 or 5 or something. I can't remember. It's somewhere in that range. And then I got probably 30, 40 calls the second day that I was going to be picked. Still nothing. And then the next day, the next day is like crazy. Like I think people pick like every like 15, 20 seconds and they go through like 30 rounds or 20. I don't even remember. It's like a huge number of rounds in that day. And dude, I was getting calls right and left. Like, I mean, I was probably like 5 an hour for hours of like, hey, we're getting you with our next pick. And then their next pick would come and someone else's name would be up there. Hey, we're getting you with our next pick and someone else's name would be up there. And I was just like, what in the world is going on? You know? And I finally just like, I mean, basically being told you're going to be picked, anywhere between basically the 3rd through the 10th. There's no way you're falling past the 10th. And I was like, all right. So that was kind of what I fully expected. And then to come all the way down to the 30th and just be your phone just blowing up all day long. Like it was just, I can't express to you like how much of a wild adventure that was, a frustrating adventure that was. But really a cool learning thing that got really used in my life, and kind of going back to what you said earlier, just from learning from experiences. And like it was just God's way of saying, like I feel like it was God's way of saying, like this is the journey I'm taking you on, right? And it's not your journey, it's my journey that through you. And
right.
the fact that you get to share a story of how many 30th rounders get a chance to play in the big leagues, and there's just not that many, right? I mean, not many people get to the big leagues in general, but how many like actual 30th rounders get to say that they actually got to step foot on that field and play in a game and do those type of things. Like just another evidence of like, man, like who knows, you never know what your journey looks like. And
Right.
it was just, yeah, that experience was something like any other. I don't I
It's not
finally got to a
everyone's
point I just like
experience.
literally like, it's not. I literally
But
like
I'm
turned
sure
my
you could
phone off.
share that story with other people. There's some
Yeah.
people that are in the same exact boat as you, because
Yeah. I
I
literally turned
know
my phone off.
it.
I was like, I'm done. Like I can't, I just turned it off. I was like, I'm out. Like I
Just
just,
wait till it
whatever.
happens.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. And then all of a sudden, my
Oh
dad, like this is
man.
probably like 15, 20 minutes later, I just turned it off. And I think of 5 or so rounds had kind of gone by. And the last straw, honestly, was the Mariners called me and said, "Hey, we're picking you with our next pick." It was in like the 20, I think it was the 20th. And they ended up picking a high school kid um, from Hawaii who was a catcher, and his name was Carlton Tanabe. Great kid, by the way, awesome dude. Um, and I was just like, I'm done. Like, boom, my phone went off. I like threw it over the, I like threw it off to the wall. Like I was like, I'm finished. And I was just like laying down, like watching a movie. I was just like, man, like whatever. This is happens, it happens. Like it doesn't, like, okay, you know. And then my dad comes like running in, like literally like 10, 15 minutes later. And he's like, "You just got picked." I was like, "What?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, you idiot. No one can tell you because your phone's sitting against a wall over there, turned off. So of course you didn't know, you know." But
So
anyway,
the same team picked you 10 rounds later.
yeah, yeah.
What a
After
journey,
they had just
man.
picked another high school kid. Yeah. So there was like,
What a
I
journey.
think we picked a first round catcher that year, who's actually one of the guys that is Steve Barron, who actually a great dude, and we had a good relationship, became friends, and he's actually on the fraternity of guys that works in the company, and so Steve Barron was our supplemental first round pick. And we had Trevor Coleman, who was a ninth or 10th rounder that year out of Missouri, which he's from my area. He's from Texas, so we have kind of a cool connection. He was actually DBU was high on his list, and then I signed, and then he went to Missouri instead. Um, Great dude. Played against him in the Cape as well. Um, and then I think we had one other one, and then Tanabe, and then me. So I was like the fifth catcher taken that year or something like that.
Wow, they loaded up.
I'm telling you, just again, but it was just like another evidence of just like, man, like God
And
saying
then
like,
they
hey,
all
bro, this is your
slowly
journey.
fell. And then there was you, the lone man standing, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was, dude, it was crazy.
Okay, so let's fast forward. You're at the plate. You're
Oh boy.
facing
Okay.
you're facing Andy Pettit.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
fast forward. You make your
Okay.
major league debut.
Yeah.
We'll skip the story because you said it's not as cool as the other one. So we'll go right to you're facing Andy Pettit.
I don't know. The
And
call up story is kind of a cool story. We can get to it in a second. Yeah.
yeah. So let's go back. But you get to appear in a game for the Mariners, and lo and behold, here comes who I thought is a Hall of Fame caliber pitcher. I mean, Andy
Yeah.
Pettit is just insane. Talk to me about getting in the box and facing that major league pitcher, not getting like some Joe
Yeah.
Schmo, right?
Yeah.
But getting
Yeah.
freaking
Well, Andy
getting.
got a Joe Schmo. So yeah. So Andy, dude, that was a wild experience because he's a Texas guy as well. Um, and I just remember, my mom had worked for the Rangers pretty much my whole life growing up. She was a part of the front office, and so I was at games all the time. We were just baseball rats, and my dad was a police officer who worked security at the game. So, I mean, my childhood was basically, spent at the ballpark eating helmet nachos. Like that was pretty much like that was my diet, and that was how I grew big and strong, guys. Helmet nachos. So solid dietary advice. But so I had grown up like watching that guy because the Braves and the Yankees were battling a lot through the late '90s, early 2000s. Um, and the Yankees were always on TV, right? Because they were in the World Series, they were making their runs and doing their thing when I was, growing up. And so seeing that, like being a part of that, like watching that guy, and then obviously that guy being the first dude that you face, it was also, a lot of people forget this. It was Mariano Rivera's last year. It was his farewell tour as well. Um,
Right.
and then it probably would have been Jeter's farewell tour as well had he not broken his ankle early in that season. Um, so it was kind of had this whole like kind of big thing a part of it. Because I believe Pettit didn't last much longer. I think that was Pettit's last year as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was the following, but those three basically were kind of on their last tours. And so the the at bat was kind of surreal and in general, right? Like like I said, I've been in the ground the game a long time. And I'd seen a lot of major league debuts before. I don't know, and a lot of people called me and texted me the same thing. I don't know if I've ever, maybe a handful in my life, of 45,000 people giving you a standing ovation in your first at bat. Like, I was a nobody, right? I'm still nobody. Like, but like that, I just don't know if that I've ever seen that happen before. I didn't actually even realize it was happening. I got to obviously, reflect on it after the game and different things. I was just like, man, that was crazy. But I didn't know it was happening. Laz Diaz was the one who actually told me. So if you watch that at bat before, like I go to step in the box and I'm kind of getting ready, and then he talks to me, and like I kind of turn back and I step out. And basically what he told me was, you can't step in my box until you acknowledge them. And I was like, what? And he was like, this is for you. And I said, what? I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, these people are standing for you. You can't get in my box until you acknowledge them. And I was like, what is happening? And so I, I just like vaguely, like, I still don't remember like seeing anybody. I just like took my hat off and tipped it and then got back in and then got back in the box. And like, it was funny. Once I got back in the dugout, like everybody was ragging on me. They were like, "Oh, hey, I'm here. Here you go. Like I've arrived." And I was like laughing. Right, it was a funny time, but I was like, "Man, Laz told me how to do it, or I couldn't get in the box." And I was like, "I didn't know what to do. I don't know. I've been here for 62 minutes. I don't know what's going on." So, like, so anyway, like that whole process happened before I even got in the box, right? And then just to kind of look out there and like see the patented like Pettit like left-handed glove like flared wide open, just like barely like over his eyes, like barely peeking over. It was just kind of like, all right, man, let's go. Like this is
Yes,
cool.
sir.
So
Right.
um, that part of it, like in terms of like, I had those emotions like afterwards, like during the moment, like obviously I was just like in the box, like ready to compete, and I was just like, all right, man, like let's go. Like I didn't really think about who was on the mound and like who we were facing, like any of that. Like that part didn't matter to me. But as I was able to kind of reflect, you know, after the game and months and years later, like those thoughts have, been pretty cool. But to say that you've
Oh,
done
that's a
that,
great story for sure.
and then he struck me out on my second at bat, and I talked to him afterwards the next day during BP, and I was like, "Bro, why you gotta throw me that?" Like it was a back foot slider. It was a good one. He got a lot of us that day on that pitch, and he laughed and he was like, "Oh, sorry." He goes, "I'll be honest, but that was one of the better sliders I've thrown in my career." And I was like, "Oh, so you had to throw it to me, man. Appreciate that. Like, thanks." But and then I got to the funny thing about that is I actually ran into Andy on the summer travel circuit this past year. So I was doing some help. I was helping coach do some catching and hitting stuff for Alpha Prime, and we were out at USA Baseballs in North Carolina, and I ran into him. We played Andy's team. Andy's son was playing on the team. And I got to go over and say what's up to him. after the game, and I was like, "Hey, you probably don't remember me. Like my name's Brandon Bantz, whatever. Like I made my debut up in Seattle. It was actually your 250th career win." And he was like, "Oh yeah, the slider guy." And I was like, "Oh, I'm that guy, huh?" And he started laughing. He was like, "Nah, man, that was a cool experience, man. I really appreciate you coming up. Like that was really cool how they gave you a standing O. Like I'd never really seen that before. I've been around a long time." I was
Yeah,
like,
they
"Man,
remembered everything, huh? That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it was
That's
pretty cool."
awesome.
So it was a moment like, you look back on that, you're like, man, like that guy's been around, seen everything, like done everything pretty much in this game. And like he remembers that moment like as a kind of a
Totally.
special thing, like something that was unique in the baseball world that he hasn't really seen before. So um that was cool. That was a cool thing to kind of, be able to
Great
be a part of.
stories, man. Great stories. This is why we're here. We're here for the
That's
good
right.
behind the scenes info.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's
I got a
finish.
lot of
Let's
good
finish
stories.
with your, you got the call that you're coming up to the big leagues. Give me
Right.
give me the story about that. We'll leave our fans with another major league call up story to finish
Hmm.
here.
Well, so that story. So let's see. We had a day game in Tacoma. Um, and then we had an off day the next day. So it was about it was probably like 11:30 or 12 at night when I got the phone call. And the funny thing is my cousin, he had texted me and he was like, "Hey man, Sucre just got hurt." He's like, "You're getting the call." And I was like, "Bro, you're smoking crack. There's no way they're calling me to the big, like you're ridiculous, like I was like, Mike Zanino is also on this team. You do realize that, right? Like, no, like I'm not going up. And he's like, just watch, it's happening. I had kind of a good stretch. I'd struggled coming up the first, few months of the season. I hadn't really been playing that well. But there was like a couple week stretch there where I kind of got that feel back and was playing pretty well. Um, and I was just like, bro, like you're smoking it, like get out of here. And this was like probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And so again, like fast forward, I get a phone call a couple hours later from our farm director and it said Chris Gwynn on the phone. And I was like, what? I was like, why is he calling me? Like 12 o'clock at night. And so I was like, Chris, what's up, man? And he's like, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm gonna need you to go pack your stuff. Um, there's a possibility you're going to the big leagues tomorrow. And I was like, Chris, funny joke, bro. Like, stop. And he's like, I joke a lot, but I won't joke about this. And I was like, dude, there's no way. And he's like, I'm telling you, it's real. And him and I went back and forth for like 5 minutes. I was just like, Chris, stop lying to me. You're not telling the truth. This is stupid. Like, and so anyway, after about 5 minutes, he's like, Vance, believe what you want, but you're going to big leagues tomorrow. Go get your stuff packed. And he was like, you need to be in they had I want to say they had like an 11 a.m. game that day, the next day. So I basically had to be at the field by like 7 or 8 in the morning. I think it was like 8 in the morning. And I was in Tacoma. So I don't know if you guys are familiar. I mean, obviously in San Diego, the California people realize that like the 405 traffic is very similar to the 5 in Seattle because of all the construction and it's terrible. So I had to basically leave my host house. I was staying with a host family. I had to leave at probably like 6 a.m. the next day. And it was midnight already when he called me. And I still had to go get my stuff and pack it all up and whatever. So I didn't get home till probably like 1 or 2 in the morning. No, probably like 2 in the morning from the field. And I had to leave at 6. And I mean, obviously, anyone when you get that phone call, like there's no way you're gonna be able to like your freaking emotions are going, like your thoughts going, like dude, it's crazy. Like I don't really drink I don't really drink caffeine, I don't do energy drinks, like I don't do any of that stuff just by choice, not for any other reason. I just whatever. But I remember being like, must be what it feels like to be like, to just crush an energy drink right now. Like I can't even like everything's moving, like I'm freaking shaking. Like I was like, I couldn't sleep. And so I think I might have slept like 30, 40 minutes that night. So I get up, like pack my stuff and like I head to the field. Um, and I get there, like the whole locker, I go talk to Wedge and like that whole thing, right? And I'm just like sitting in my locker and I'm just like, man, like this is happening. This is happening, like we're here, like we're doing this thing. And so our first game goes 16 innings that I'm there against the Astros. And Dallas Keuchel started that day. And like I'm sitting in the bullpen, like probably around the 6th or the 7th. I'm sitting in the bullpen, right? And probably around the 9th, 10th, I start dozing off. Like I start falling. Who falls asleep in their first game in the big leagues? Like I'm sitting in the bullpen and I'm like dozing off. And I'm like, dude, I can't stay awake right now. I'm so tired. Like I haven't slept. Like, because we had a night game, obviously Saturday, then an early day game Sunday, right? And
Right.
then you play, and I play, we play all day, and then you're, tired, whatever. And it's like, then you don't sleep because I hadn't been to sleep since Saturday, or it's Friday night, whatever. And so, dude, I'm dying. Like I'm dying and sitting in the bullpen. And I'm like, who would have thought my first ever energy drink I was going to have to drink would be in the bullpen of your first ever big league game because you're falling asleep? I was like, this is ridiculous. So I'm sitting there like crushing a Red Bull in the bullpen, like standing up, like pacing around. Everyone thinks I'm nervous. I'm not nervous. I'm just trying not to fall asleep. So like the guys are just sitting there and they're like, dude, like relax. I'm like, trust me, dudes, I'm not nervous.
That's
Like
hilarious.
I'm just, I want to move around. Like, it's late. Like maybe we pinch hit. Like I want to be sure, like I'm ready to go. Like that was what I was telling them. But in my head, I was like, no, I'm just trying not to pass out right now. And so that was the whole story, right there. So then, I get
That's
there.
did you shotgun the Red Bull and smash it on your head like that one
Dude,
pitcher
I
for the
should have. I
Phillies?
should have. Yeah, that
That would
that
have
would have been an
helped.
epic start. That would have been an epic start
They're
to the
like, this
career. That
guy
would
is
have been like,
nervous, crazy, and half asleep.
dude,
Everyone's
I
like,
don't even know what to think about this guy. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it would have helped me. I probably should have. But
that's
yeah,
classic.
I don't know. Yeah, so that
Well,
was
I
the
don't think anyone can relate to that story, but the one earlier where you got 50 million calls on draft day, that's a little more relatable. But man, what to get no sleep before your call up? I mean, substantially, like not even an ounce of sleep, right? Like
none,
that's
like
tough, man.
zero.
That
Yeah,
is
and
tough.
had played coming off like a 3-game stretch. So, obviously in AAA, the travel's not great. People think
Right.
it's like, oh, it's AAA, it's probably good. You're flying everywhere. No, it's terrible because you're flying commercial. So you're literally on the first flight out every single day at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is,
Right.
going wherever you're going. So like you're up at 2 or 3 in the morning. So we got home. We got home on Saturday morning, right? So Friday night we play, then we fly out Saturday morning at like 2 or 3 in the morning, right? So you get no sleep Friday. Then I played Saturday night game. Then we have to be back at the field again early Sunday, and I played Sunday. All right. So then
That's
it was
insane.
like 3 consecutive days. And then you have the
Right.
next day where it was like nothing, And I was just like,
Yeah.
man, oh man.
I would have been extremely cranky. Like,
Oh, dude.
I'd
I
have
was
been
like, I was
edgy
trying
as
so
can
hard.
be for that.
Yeah. I was trying so hard, man, to
Mr.
just,
Positive right
whew,
here.
oh gosh.
You're like,
Oh man. I was just trying not to look like I was just like not engaged or whatever, like I'm just kind of like, man, like again, go back to the belonging story of just like, man, like I don't know, like I played against all these guys, but watched a bunch of them on TV now, and
Right.
watching, all these dudes hitting the cage and Raul Banez just I mean that there's some wild experiences where I look back like in my career and I'm just like, man, like I don't really know what I'm doing here, like I remember my first game after that we have early work on the field at the stadium, and these dudes are doing like short box overhand toss. So it's basically like front toss but overhand, like that distance away. So there's not like a ton on it, right? And these dudes are putting it like 20, 30 rows deep. Like I'm like, what? That's not real life. Like I can't do that. Like I don't have that kind of juice. Like what in the world, Like just regular. I mean, think about doing front toss and hitting that thing 20 rows deep, in left center at Safeco of all places where the ball doesn't go anywhere. Like
Right.
effortless. Just these dudes are just Michael Morrison BP's like knocking down the sign at above the freaking second deck patio up there. He's like putting lights out up there because I'm just like, dude, like what in the world, And then I remember Martin Maldonado. So this was my first time. I had gone from low A in my first year in professional baseball. I was in low A for like 3 and 4 weeks maybe, and then they moved me to double A. And I'd been in double A for I don't know a week, and I'm sitting in the dugout, and there's this debate that they've been having for a week, um, about who was a better, like who the best catchers were in the league. I don't know how this came up, but they had they were kind of talking about, I was involved in that, and I was like, you guys need to just chill out. I've been here a week, like relax. And then there was two or three other guys, right? I never heard the name. I didn't know who he was, but we were playing the Brewers that day, and everybody was kind of sitting next to me because the Martin Maldonado was the other guy that was in the league at the time, and he was the one that they were talking about that could really really throw. And so I was like, okay. So I'm sitting there watching. So you know how this day and age with the base running, how they do those like jump lead steal things, right?
Hmm.
Well, one of our guys kind of did that, and this was back before it was popular. And he wasn't a slow guy; like he was an above average runner, um, and he did that. The catcher or the pitcher had a big leg kick, and then threw a slider. Martin Maldonado caught this ball. I promise you, I thought he caught it barehanded because I never saw his glove. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. And then he went from that to his knees, and the ball got to second base before I even like blinked. I didn't even know what happened. And he made this throw like bang, bang. The guy was safe, but it was like bang, bang. And I just remember sitting in the dugout, like with my hand over my mouth like this. And I just like looked around, and everyone's just dying laughing. Like they're just laughing hysterically. And I was like, there's no way that just happened. Like the pitcher was like a 1-4. Our guy got at least a step and a half, 2 steps before he even picked up his leg, and he threw an off speed pitch, and he made that bang bang at second base. I was like, there's no like. I just remember sitting there and being like, this is double A. I have no shot. I have no. There's no way. Like I can't do that. Like what's he doing in double A? Like what do they look like in the big leagues? Like, you know. Um, and I remember I'll tell you, this will be my last one, but same year, Giancarlo Stanton's in double A with Miami. And we are we're throwing him, I'm pitching him inside because that's kind of where he didn't like the ball. He still doesn't really like the ball there anyway. But we throw him a pitch, and I don't know many people that know Jacksonville Stadium in Jacksonville, Florida, but like it's a pretty big yard. It's like 380, 385 in the gap. And then there's there's like bullpen section where guys will sit, right? And then there's like a playground, and then there's like a 50 or 60-foot top high scoreboard. And then on top of the scoreboard, there's like a clock, like a ball with like a clock on it. So just to get to the scoreboard, easily over 400 feet, right? So we throw him a pitch, and he hits a ball, and I just remember just the bat basically just willowing in his hand, right? And I was like, oh hell yeah, we got him, because at the time, like Giancarlo's stats in AA were stupid, like, I mean, just ungodly. Like, I want to say he had he'd been there, I want to say a month, maybe a month, like 6 weeks. And he was already like mid-20 in his home runs. And he was there for like 6 weeks. Like, it was ridiculous. And so I was like, oh, sick, we got him. And then the ball just like, it didn't stop. Like, I was just like, what? He hit the clock on the top of the freaking scoreboard. And his bat was he had the handle like this, and then the barrel was like lumped over like this. The only reason the barrel didn't fall off because he was still holding it in his hand. And I was like
So he
sitting there, and
barreled
he's
it
running
and just broke it in his hand. Just like a
just snapped it. Like, I thought we jammed him. Like, I didn't think he hit it that good. So I don't know, maybe the bat was already broken and he barreled it. Like, when he hit it, the force just like snapped it, or like we actually jammed him and he snapped it, or if he like broke it just being just sheer strength and just broke it. Like, I don't know which one was which, but regardless of what happened, he had 2 pieces of bat in his hand and the ball went like 450 feet. Like,
hit the clock.
and he's running the bases. And I like put my helmet on top of my head, like the mask on top of my head. And I just remember looking at the umpire in just like utter disbelief. Like, I couldn't believe it. And he gave me the ball and I walked out. I'm like walking out there and I'm like, this isn't real. Like, there's no way. Like, how did he like
what field was this at again?
Jacksonville, Florida.
All right. I'm gonna take a peek. I might have to do like the GPS world and check out the launch angle.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if it's still there, but like, I haven't seen it in quite a few years. But like, I know the field's there. I just don't know if it's changed around, if they've moved, done any additions or anything. But like, I literally just remember like being like, there's no way. Like, how is this guy still here? What's he still doing?
It's crazy
here?
when someone hits a ball that hard. To me, it's insane.
I don't even know I don't know what to do with that. Like, but again, that's just,
you see that ball that Yelich hit this year? It was like, he hit it at Colorado, and it was like third deck in right center. Yeah. Like, whoa! I know it's Colorado, but still, the balls that go 500 feet, it's like how, I don't even understand how that happened, right?
Yeah, I can't. I don't even want to drive that far, and you're hitting it that far. Like, I got.
Oh man!
Like the Ohtani one that he hit at Safeco when he hit it over the restaurant in the third deck. Like, people don't realize how far that is.
That was a bomb in the home run. You're talking about in the home run derby, right?
Was it the derby? I thought it was maybe a BP or something, but regardless, it was in Safeco. I don't remember, but he hit it.
I think I remember what you're talking about. Yeah, he hit a few in the derby that was just unreal too, right?
Yeah.
Well, dude, the stories were legit, B. That was like that was top-notch podcast level right there, bro.
I appreciate it, man.
Let's finish with this. Give everyone all the info to your social stuff where they can follow you on Catcher Central. If you're in the Denver area, dude, check my guy out. He coaches big leaguers, catchers, hitters. Boom, go check him out. Where should they follow you?
Yeah, so all of our socials are the same. It's just at Catcher Central, no spaces or anything. So Instagram, Twitter, um, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll be, working on building the YouTube channel, but we haven't really released anything on that yet. But that one's at Catcher Central as well. All of them are the same, so easy to remember. And then, yeah, man, we'll be putting a lot of stuff coming out in the new year. So a lot of new gear that'll be coming out. It'll be pretty cool. I'm excited about that because I'm a swag guy. I like swag. So,
Gotta go with the
so we'll have a lot
gear.
of cool gear. And then we'll have a lot of cool events coming throughout the year. So be on the lookout. I know we're going to be in the Northwest and the Seattle area coming soon. Hawaii, back in LA here. Then if we can get, if I can get, DR here to let me hang out in San Diego for a little bit. Maybe we can get something going on in San
Oh,
Diego.
bro, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, and then we'll be in Texas, Philly. So working on all over the place. And then if you guys are interested in having us come out to your area, man, hit us up on the socials and let's see if we can get something going.
That's awesome, man. Well, dude, thanks again for joining me. Appreciate your time. You are a good follow, so check him out on Instagram, especially. He's got catchers doing amazing things. So follow my guy Brandon Bantz here. Thanks again for watching the show. Boom, buddy. That was awesome. Thank you so much
Hey,
for joining
I
me, man.
appreciate you having me. Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate you having me, dude.